All right, so we're going to go through a series of ACT math questions here. The answers here are shown. It also shows an incorrect answer, but we're going to focus our attention on the reason why, right? So this is not all about just finding the correct answer because it will be on the screen. It's really more so about, well, how do we get to that correct answer given the type of question we have? And at all times, we're going to always be focused on what is the strategy, what is the pattern to recognize. And we'll see if we see some of those patterns. I'll try to call them out throughout this video. So this first question here is a matrix question. It's asking about subtracting the first matrix or the second matrix from the first matrix. Whenever we're adding or subtracting matrices, really all we care about is position, right? So in essence, this first matrix is a 4x2. 4 columns, 2 rows. Maybe I said the wrong way. Maybe it's 2x4, 2 rows, 4 columns, as well as the second matrix is also 2x4, 2 rows and 4 columns. So we're going to look at, well, what's the thing in the first position here and the thing in the first position there, and then utilize this operator, right? So we're subtracting. So our answer in the first position should be 5 minus 8, which is -3. Right, so if I were to start writing the answer here, that means this thing, the first position here should be a -3, which because it's multiple choice, I'm going to always be looking back and forth between the work I do and the answer choices. So if I know that that first position should be a -3, that means choice A cannot be correct. That also means choice C cannot be correct, right? It looks like between choices B and D, I have -4 there, so I'm not going to waste my time. I have -10 here. I'm not going to waste my time. I have 22 between both of them. I'm not going to waste my time. It looks like I only have enough. The next differentiator is this second row, first position. So let's focus there. So second row, first position, we have a 0 in this one and a -5. So again, using the operator of minus in between, I have 0 minus -5, which is the same as 0 plus 5, which means this position right here should be a +5, and which tells me then that the answer has to be choice B, which we already knew, but now we understand why, right? So again, I only did work for finding the -3 and the +5, and honestly, if I had paid closer attention, I should have only went for this +5 because -3 is the same between these two things here. So it doesn't really waste time because I guess that -3 did help me to cross out A and C. So then, looking at that second row, first position helps me with figuring out between B and D as the right answer. So let's move on. So our next question here is this question here. So this question is what I'm going to call strategy-wise. Really, we can look at this in two different ways. We can say this is a simplified question. So simplified questions are always short, somewhere between 1 and 3 lines long, and contains an equation or expression. In this case, we have an expression. So I'm going to solve it that way, and then I'm going to show you one other way in case that's a value. So we have this 206, we have this cube root of 216, a to the 27th, b to the 729th. First and foremost, again, I'm looking at my answer choices. I know that the cube root of 216 must be either 6 or 72. So we can go straight to our calculator if you want and say, well, what is the cube root of 216 in the calculator? And what you will find is that the cube root of 216 is actually equal to 6, which means that answer choices H and J are automatically gone. The next thing to know is that the cube root of a to the 27th. So anytime you have a cube root and a power on your variable, we just divide these by each other, right? So 27 divided by 3 is 9, which means this equals a to the 9th power. And again, looking at choices F and G, only G has the 6 that we want and the a to the 9th power that we want. And that's why choice G is correct, right? So let me show you one other way. So that's using the simplified method. The other method we could use is plug in your own number. So PIYON for plug in your own number. I like this strategy. It's not really necessary for this question, but it could be very valuable in future questions. The way that you know that you can use the strategy is whenever you see variables in the answer choices, or a single variable in the answer choices, and and in the question. So for instance, this is how this would work. If I set A equals 2, and let's say I set B equals to 3, then I can go to my calculator and figure out what is the cube root of 216 times 2 to the 27th times 3 to the 729th. I'm going to get some answer from that. That answer, which I'll just put as like a box to represent that answer. That answer is going to be whatever it is. And then the next thing we do is we go to the answer choices and we plug this into our calculator as well. Like if we're trying choice F, we'll say, okay, well, what is 6 times 2 to the 3rd times 3 to the 9th? And does it equal what we got here? Obviously, since choice F is not correct, it will not equal that. And obviously, when we try choice G, and we do 6 times 2 to the 9th times 3 to the 243rd, this will equal what we got in this box over here. So that's how you use plugging your own number as a strategy. I do suggest that you try it out. Again, it's a strategy. It's not something that you have to use. I kind of like to use it as much as I can, especially when I don't know how to simplify something, or if I think that simplifying will take a long time. But there's an example of how to use that strategy. All right, so let's move on from there. So our next question, this is what we call a translate word problem question. We know that it's translate word problem because the question is 4 or more lines long. That's how we can tell. And the idea here is that we never want to read the question all the way through, right? We're never going to just start at a florist and read all the way through bouquet. Instead, we're going to read one sentence at a time, making sure to stop at the end of each sentence to make sure we understood what we just read, and then also translating or writing down the meaning of any quantitative information. So let me show you what that looks like. So in this particular question, the first sentence says a florist makes bouquets of flowers that can have tulips and carnations. All right, I think I understand what that means. I'm actually going to write down that a bouquet equals tulips plus carnations, right? Like that is my translation of the first sentence. The objective here is that we never have to reread the question. So in essence, this line that I wrote in my notes means that I never have to go back and read sentence 1. Like that's really the strategy here. Sentence 2, a bouquet of 3 tulips, right? So I'll say B for bouquet. We're gonna say 3 T, T for tulips, and 7 carnations. So 7C for carnations, and math-wise just means plus. So 3T plus 7C costs $56. So 3T, 3 tulips, plus 7C, 7 carnations, is equal to $56. There's my translation for the second sentence. Keep reading. A bouquet of 7 tulips and 3 carnations. So now we have 7T plus 3C is equal to $44. So you can see that just by translating these sentences, we end up with a system of equations, right? We have 3T plus 7C equals 56, and we have 7T plus 3C equals 44. The question goes on to ask, what is the price of 1 carnation in a bouquet? So I'm going to just write down C equals question mark. That's what we're trying to find. But the process that we use is the process that we always use for systems of equations. So I want to solve for C, which means I want my T values to cancel. I'm going to use a process called elimination. I'm going to multiply this bottom equation by -3. I'm going to multiply this top equation by +7. In doing so, this top equation becomes 21T plus 49C equals, I don't have my calculator on me, 7 times 50 is 350, 7 times 6 is 42, so 392. And then second equation, -3 times 7, that's -21T, right? This is the reason why I chose 7 and -3, so that those T values can cancel out. -3 times +3 is -9C. Obviously could have written that as -3C. I wrote it as plus -9C, which is fine. And then we have 3 times 44, which is 40 times 3 is 120. 4 times 3 is 12, so 132, or negative 132. Okay, so now we add these two equations together. 21t minus 21t is gone. 49c minus 9c is 40c. And 392 minus 132 is 0, 6, 260, right? And then I can divide this 260 divided by 40, which, if I divide by 40 on both sides, I'm going to get, I can cross these 4s out. 4 goes into 26. And again, this is all, you can use a calculator, by the way. I'm just showing you the math on screen, but you can do this by calculator. What you'll find after doing it via calculator is that the 260 divided by 40 is equal to 6.5. And that's why choice G is the correct answer. All right, so let's go to the next one. So this next question here is, what is the median of the data set shown? So median, a lot of students make mistakes here because they mix up the word median with mean. So let's just do a little bit of review. So mean equals average, right? So an average equals sum of, I'll call it data points, divided by number of data points. I'll say DP for data points, all right? That's how you find the average. The median is different, right? So the median is actually simpler. The median is just the middle value. Right. What's important to understand about the middle value, however, is that you have to arrange your data points in order. So if we were to arrange these data points in order, looks like they are already in, no, I have this 24 here messing things up. So I'm going to just rewrite this in order. So my smallest number here is 11. My second smallest is the 13. Looks like I have 15 twice. And then looks like 19 is definitely next, and then 22, but then I have to put that 24 right here, which is probably why the student made the mistake here. So it's got to be a 24 there, and then comes 26, and then comes 28, and then comes, I'll just go down to the next line, and then comes 30, and 33, and 36, and 37, and 46. All right, so there's our list in increasing order. To find the middle term, I always just cross out from the ends, right? So smallest crosses out largest, next smallest crosses out next largest, and we just continue in that way. So 15 with 33, 19 with 30, 22 and 28, and we're left with these two values being in the middle. Whenever you have two middle numbers, you take the average, right? In order to find the median, you take the average of the two middle values, right? So median is the middle value, but if there are two middle values, to find the median, you take the average of the two middle values. And like I said up here in terms of the defining how to find a mean or how to find an average, to find the average between 24 and 26, we just add 24, right? We add the two data points, 24 plus 26. We divide by the number of data points in this case, which is 2. And 24 plus 26 is 50, and 50 divided by 2 is 25. And that is why choice F is the right answer, right? So we see the answer there, but again, the whole point of this video is to show you why. And very interesting, we can see that 42.6% of students chose 27. So a larger percentage of students on this platform chose the wrong answer, which is the same answer this student chose, versus the correct answer. And I'm pretty certain it had to do with the fact that this 24 was out of place. So just be mindful of that on the ACT. Be mindful of the fact that if you're getting a question about median, the order does matter. So just make sure things are in their proper order. All right, let's move on. Next question. The equation of an ellipse is given by the equation, this. What is the center of the ellipse? So if you have a graphing calculator that graphs ellipses, I would just put this into the graphing calculator, right? That's going to be the easiest way. And then just look at your graph from your calculator and see which one of the answer choices matches. Because I know that the formula for an ellipse is y minus k squared over, let's call it a squared plus x minus h squared over, let's call it b squared, equals 1. And I know that the center is h comma k, right? So again, if you didn't know that, this might be a good thing to write down for your notes. Again, I don't think this is the most efficient way. However, really the most efficient way is to just graph this equation in your graphing calculator and see the ellipse for yourself. And then you'll clearly be able to tell where the center is. But if we do that, we can see that our h value here is a positive 4, right? Because in order for us to have a negative 4 here, that means our h has to be positive 4. And in order for us to have a positive 1 here for our k value must have been a negative 1. And that is the reason why choice D is the correct answer, right? And you can see that choice B was the runner-up. The student chose this one incorrectly, but also it's definitely the runner-up for the question or the answer that most students choose when they miss this question. So you see that, again, this is ellipse formula, but just use a calculator, right? This is, I'm going to say strategy-wise, this is a calculator question all day. So get used to that as much as you can. Next question, what is the sum of the solutions to the quadratic equation? I mean, to be honest, I would also use a calculator here. So here we're finding our first trend, right? This is also a calculator question. If you throw this into a calculator, you're going to get a parabola, and that parabola is going to have x-intercepts, and those are the solutions, right? The solutions to the quadratic equation are the x-intercepts. So you'll find where both of those are, and then you'll add those x-intercepts together because the question wants you to find the sum of the solutions, and then you'll find your answer to be choice G. Let's say we're not using that calculator. How will we do the same thing? It's actually pretty complicated because none of these answers are actual solutions. They are sums of solutions. So there's not really much more we can do here. So I'm going to say the calculator is your best bet. Just remember that the solutions will be found at the x-intercepts. And when you add those together, you will find that choice G is the correct answer. All right. So then let's see. Do I want to show you this? Let me just go ahead and show you this. So if I were to set this to 0, 6x squared plus x minus 15 equals 0. And then if I were to find where the x-intercepts are, like basically where x values make this equal to 0, we could say that, let's see, I can do this one pretty quickly. 6 times 15 is 90. So I'm going to just say this is the same as x squared plus x minus 90. The two numbers I multiply to equal negative 90 and add up to positive 1. I'd have x plus 10 x minus 9. And then because I honestly should reincorporate the 6, I divide both of these by 6. Hopefully you know this pathway, by the way. If not, we can discuss it further. You can leave a comment or we can talk about it further, which means that this becomes x plus 10 over 6 reduced is 5 over 3. So 5/3. And 9 over 6 reduced is 3 over 2. So x minus 3 over 2, which means our solutions are when we set x plus 5/3 equal to 0, which means x is equal to negative 5/3. And when we set x minus 3/2 equals 0, which means we have x equals positive 3/2. So if we want to take the sum of those things, I'm going to just give some space here. Negative 5/3 plus 3/2. So negative 5/3 plus 3/2. I want to have a common denominator. Honestly, again, you can just throw this into a calculator, get a decimal answer, and then see which decimal matches the fraction answer to the right. So we could just go straight calculator here as well. But just to show you longhand, to add these fractions together, I want to have a common denominator, which will be 6. So this becomes negative 10 over 6 plus 9 over 6, which is equal to negative 1 over 6. And that's why choice G is the best answer. So I wanted to show you exactly how we got to G instead of just saying use a calculator. Using a calculator is still the best method, but now you can see the math behind exactly how we would get there. All right, next question. Again, translate word problem questions are 4 or more lines long. And again, our objective is to not read the entire passage all the way through. Like that's the main thing that I want to make sure I emphasize for students. If you just load all that information in, I think it's not a wise behavioral choice for you. So let's read it one sentence at a time, like we did with the previous one, and then make sure we write down any quantitative information. So this first sentence here says, Sadie and Mia are in the same class, and 2 students are going to be chosen at random from their class for an upcoming competition. All right, this seems like it's setting us up for a probability question. I skimmed down and I do see this word probability. I just want you to know whenever you see the word probability, it's going to be a fraction where the numerator is what you want to happen, right? The probability of what you want to happen, the ways in which what you want can happen. And then the denominator is what you have, right? Or the total options that are in front of you. So we know we have a class. So here's my translation. I know I have a class. In this class, I know there's Sadie and Mia. The question goes on to say that there are 25 students in their class. I'm gonna just write 25 under class. What is the probability that they will both be selected to represent their class? All right, well, there's going to be 2 things because you're not selecting 2 people at the same time. I don't think you're selecting 1 person at a time. So one additional note that I want to give you is anytime you're finding the probability for multiple events, right? In this case, choosing Sadie is one event and choosing Mia is the other event. You want to pay attention to this idea of if I want 2 things to happen, right? Like I want Sadie and Mia, then I'm going to multiply my probabilities for each individual thing happening. If I want only one of 2 things happening, meaning I want one thing or the other, then I'm going to add the probabilities of both things happening to each other. So let's just keep that in mind. We're obviously in the and category with this particular question. So what is the probability of choosing Sadie or Mia on that first choice? Well, there's 2 things that I want. I want Sadie or Mia, right? So I'm going to say that my first probability is 2 out of 25. Because how do I accomplish what I want? Well, there's 2 ways to accomplish what I want. I can choose Sadie or I can choose Mia out of the total number of students I have, which is 25. And then the second probability, now that one of them is chosen, what do I want to happen the second choice? Well, I want to choose the other student, right? So if I chose Sadie the first time, I want to make sure Maddie's chosen the second time. So now there's only one thing that I want to happen, which is choosing the other student, either Sadie or Maddie, or Mia, I'm sorry. But there's a big difference here as well. Now that I've already chosen one of them in the first probability, there are now only 24 students left for the second probability. And this is where most students make their mistake. After the first probability is a success, there are now 1 fewer students in the pool of my options. So if I said that this was, let's say that choice ended up being Sadie, well, now when it comes to choosing Maddie, right? Mia, she is 1 person out of a class that only has 24 students left because I've already chosen Sadie out of that, right? So let's do the math here. So that ends up being 2 out of 25 times 24 is 600. And then we reduce that and it becomes 1 over 300. And that is why choice D is the correct answer. So hopefully that all makes sense. You can use that for future questions. Let's move forward. So this question also is pretty short. Looks like it's going to be a simplified question if I can. So which of the following is equivalent to 2 plus 3i divided by 4 minus i? Definitely a simplified question, but you have to remember that whenever you have a complex number, which just means a number, a real number plus an imaginary number, or even if you just have an imaginary number, we cannot have that in the denominator. So the way to simplify this, again, this is a simplified question. So, and maybe just understanding that it's a simplified question versus thinking, oh, I have to solve this right away, could be a useful thing to have in your mind. Because how do we simplify this fraction? Well, we have to multiply by the conjugate. So hopefully that term sounds familiar. The conjugate is just the denominator with the plus or minus sign reversed, right? So instead of 4 minus i, I'm going to multiply by 4 plus I on top and bottom. plus I. Don't really need the parentheses, but I put them there anyway. And then we're going to simplify. So when I multiply straight across the numerator, that's going to be a FOIL situation where 2 times 4 is 8. Plus 2 times I is 2I. Plus 3I times 4 is 12I. Plus 3I times I is plus 3I squared. And then in the denominator, we'd also FOIL first times first, that is 16. Outer times outer, that is plus 4I. Inner times inner, that is minus 4I. And last time last, that is minus I squared. Let's continue simplifying this. I squared is equal to -1. So hopefully you remember that. I is equal to square root -1, and I squared is equal to -1. So 3I squared is really just a -3, right? So I'm going to say 8 minus 3 is 5, and then 2I plus 12I is a positive 14I. And again, like I usually do, I look at my answer choices, and this tells me that, if I want 5 plus 14I in the numerator, choice A is gone, and choice D is gone. I still need to do some more work to figure out whether the answer is B or C. So in my denominator, again, I squared is -1. So then negative I squared, this whole thing would just become like a +1. And 16 plus 1 is 17. And we can see that 4I minus 4I cancels out. So our final answer is 5 plus 14I over 17. And that's why choice C is the correct answer there. Perfect. All right, let's move on. Next question. What is the vertex of the quadratic equation? So the vertex is, so just so you know, a vertex of a graph of a quadratic of a parabola is basically its high point, right? So it's always its turning point. That turning point will either be the high point or it'll be the low point. This question is a calculator question. So again, this is our third calculator question that we've seen, where I'd say this question asking where the vertex is, just plug this directly into your calculator. You're going to get a parabola, and you're going to locate on your calculator exactly where the vertex is, and you will find that that is at 5.25, -28.125. That's where you'll find it. There really isn't any reason to do any math here. Just use your calculator. So let's just think about that. There's 3 questions already so far that follow that exact strategy. Just throw it into your calculator and look for what the question's asking you to find. All right, let's go to the next question. Next question is, let's see, g of x equals 2x squared plus x minus 5 over x, and f of x equals -1/2 x plus 3. What is the value of g of f of -4? So this question is a simplify question. We know that it's a simplified question because it's short. All simplified questions are short and contain an equation or expression. This has 2 equations. So what do we do? Honestly, there's no way to simplify g of x, and there's no way to simplify f of x separately. But the question does ask for g of f of -4. So I'm actually not going to use a simplify strategy here. I'm going to use plug in information from the question, right? The question is telling me that it's important for me to figure out what f of -4 is. What is f of -4? Well, f of -4 is found by going to f of x and replacing x with -4. So f of -4 is equal to -1/2 times -4 plus 3. -1/2 times -4 is +2 plus 3 is equal to 5. So f of -4 is 5. That allows us to rewrite this g of f of -4 as g of 5, because f of -4 is 5. Now we take g of 5 and say, well, now I'm going to focus my attention on the g of x equation. And instead of an x, I'm going to replace x with 5. So g of 5 is equal to 2 times 5 squared plus 5 minus 5 all over 5. 5 minus 5 is gone, so I'm going to just get rid of that immediately. 5 squared is 25. 25 times 2 is 50. This equals 50 over 5. And 50 divided by 5 is equal to 10. And that is the reason why choice D is the correct answer. So that's our reasoning behind that. So this ended up being it looks like a simplified question to me at first, but it actually ends up being a plug-in information from the question PIQ. The question told us that we wanted to find f of -4 first. We found that, and then that leads to finding g of 5 next, which we find. All right, next question. Next question, this is a system of equations. Let's see, it says for the system of equations above, what is the value of x plus y? Again, I could tell you that on a graphing calculator, you could convert each of these into y equals mx plus b form, and then graph them. And then wherever those lines intersect each other is where the solution is, right? So the point of intersection will give you an ordered pair that is x comma y at that point of intersection. And then you're just taking those values and adding them. I think that might be the easiest way to do it, to be honest. So I'm going to call this a calculator question. So slightly different calculator question than the previous one. Not everybody's calculator can take just plugging in this format. If you have one where you can just type in 3/2 x plus 4/3 y equals 10 and 1/2 x plus 1/3 y equals 12, even better, because even less work. If your calculator forces you to set it up as y equals, then here's where the work is, right? You need to convert those equations into slope-intercept form, y equals mx plus b form. Then once you have that in your calculator, you'll get a graph, or two graphs, two lines. Those lines will intersect at some point that represents the solution to the system of equations. And again, like I said, that point of intersection is x, y, and you just go in and add those two values to each other. So that's the best way to solve this. If I were to show you a more traditional, maybe longer way to do it in case you're interested, I would look at this as a system of equations in which I am using elimination. I think that the easiest thing to do here is to get rid of x first. It really doesn't matter. I can get rid of x or y. I'm going to get rid of x by multiplying the second equation by -3. Because when I do that, my first equation remains 3/2 x plus 4/3 y equals 10. But my second equation becomes -3/2 x. And then -3 times 1/3 just becomes minus y, right? -3 times 1/3 is -1. And then equals, oh, I just messed, oh yeah, that's good. And then -3 times 12 is -36. Okay. So then when I combine these equations together, the -3/2 and +3/2 x is eliminated, which is why it's called the process, or why it's called elimination. 4/3 y minus y is going to be equal to 1/3 y, right? Again, I can call this 3/3. Right? 1y or -1y is the same as saying -3/3 y. We know that in order to add or subtract fractions, we have to have a common denominator. So that will give me the common denominator. 4/3 minus 3/3 is 1/3. So I have 1/3 y equals 10 minus 36, which is -26. I then multiply the entire thing by 3 so that I have y equals 3 times 20 is 60, 3 times 6 is 18, so this becomes -78. So y is -78. And then how about x? So I want to solve for x as well because we want x plus y. So then I am going to say, well, if y is -78, then which one do I want to use? I'm going to use the second equation here. Then that means that 1/2 x plus 1/3 times -78 is equal to 12. And therefore I'd have 1/2 x, 1/3 times -78. Let's see, does 3 go into 78? It does, it goes in 26 times. We just figured that out. So this becomes 1/2 x minus 26 equals 12. I'd add 26 to both sides, which would lead me to go to having, let's go arrow down, 1/2 x equals 38. And then I multiply by 2 so that I just have x. And 2 times 38 is 76. So now I have my x value and I have my y value. The question wants the value of x plus y. So that would be 76 plus y is negative 78. 76 plus negative 78 is the same as 76 minus 78, and that's going to be equal to negative 2. And that's the reason why choice G is the correct answer. So hopefully that makes sense. But again, calculator saves all that time that I just used on this question. But at least now you see the mathematical backing of that as well. All right, next question. The sum of two distinct whole numbers A and B is divisible by the natural number C. I call these questions translation questions, or translate. This is called a translate. So what do I mean? This is different from translate word problem. This is obviously shorter question. We recognize these questions by realizing or recognizing that the sentence that you've read in English could be converted into a mathematical statement. The sum of, what does that mean? That means we're adding something. Somebody just put a plus sign. Two distinct whole numbers A and B. Okay, that means A plus B is divisible by the natural number C. That means divided by C. Which of the following must be true? Well, first of all, let's make sure we understand divisible by C means whatever A plus B is, once we divide by C, we're going to get a whole number, right? So I'm going to say A plus B over C equals whole number, not decimal, not fraction, but a whole number. So choice A minus B is divisible by C. Not exactly. Like, why is that the case? And in fact, we could even, there's another strategy here. So another strategy that I like to use is whenever I see variables in the answer choices, I will say that this is, battery's dying. Let me just plug this in really quick so we don't have any issues. I can just make up some numbers, right? So if I made up numbers for A and B and C to make sure these are whole numbers, I can say, well, what happens if A is 2? So if A is equal to 2, we say A is equal to 2. And let's be smart about this. If I say B is equal to 4, then I know that A plus B is 6, right? So that's 6. So what would we want to say C is equal to so that we get a whole number when we divide? I'm going to say C is equal to 3, just so they're all distinct, right? So I'm going to say C equals 3. And therefore, we'd have 6 divided by 3 equals 2, which fits exactly what the question said it should, right? So again, this strategy of plugging your own number, I forgot to finish writing it down, P-I-Y-O-N, is useful anytime you have variables in the answer choices. So that's the key. That's how you know the strategy can be used. All right, so let's see. A minus B is divisible by C. So let's see, if I did that, that would be 2 minus 4, which is negative 2, divided by 3. Nope, because that's not going to give me a whole number. So that's why A is gone. How about B? 4A plus 4B is divisible by 2C. Yes, and there's a lot of reasons why we could have seen that without plugging our own number in. But if we did this way, 4 times A would be 8. 4 times B would be 16. 2 times C would be 6. And 8 plus 16 is equal to 24. And 24 divided by 6 is equal to 4. And yes, that actually does work. Next one, C is a factor of both A and C. No, 3 is not a factor of 2, and 3 is not a factor of 4. So C is gone. And choice D, A plus B is a composite number. No, it's not. Okay, so that's just not true. So then the answer is choice B. I could have also said that this is a simplified question, right? So this kind of gives you some idea of how there's sometimes many different ways to solve these questions. So what do I mean by simplify in this case? So different from what I've mentioned in previous questions with just having a short question and simplifying the equation in the question, really, in this particular example, we could simplify the answer choice, right? So this is saying that 4a plus 4b is divisible by 2c. Well, if we were to simplify that, we say, well, if I divide everything by 2, that means this 2 is gone, that becomes 2, that becomes 2. Then I'd have 2a plus 2b is divisible by c. And I already know that a plus b is divisible by c. You know, I guess we can make some assumption there that just by multiplying the numerator by 2 doesn't change the fact that it's still divisible by 3. So that might be a bigger jump of assumption. So I do still like the fact that we use plug in your own number, because then you can clearly see that when you make up those numbers, choice B is the right answer. And if you don't trust me on that, because a lot of students don't trust this plug in your own number business, I chose, what did I choose? 2 and 4 and then 3. Make up some different numbers, right? You choose your own A and your own B. Just make sure you choose a C that makes it actually work, because we want it to be divisible by C. And then see if we still get the same answer. When you do get the same answer, I hope that that helps you to realize this is a great strategy to use in the future. All right, next question. If 2x minus y equals 3, what is the value of 256x over 16y? So this is a simplified question, all right? So this is one of my favorite types of simplified questions, because when you read it, it feels like, what are you talking about? Like, how do I simplify, or how do I solve 256x, 256 to the x power divided by 16 to the y power? So what we're going to say is, first of all, how could you simplify 256x over 16y? How could you simplify that, right? So I'm also going to probably put this in the category of learn by doing, because it's a type of question where most students, until you see it the first time, you're going to be pretty lost. And then once you see it again, it's like, okay, I've seen this before. I know what's going on. So whenever we're simplifying a fraction where the numerator and denominator, and I wrote this wrong, it should be y power, not 16 times y. Whenever we have the numerator and denominator have different variable exponents, the way that you simplify those types of questions is to make sure you get to the same base, all right? So what base could we use? Well, I'm pretty sure that this is going to be 2. Let me grab my calculator and see. Let's just do a little bit of math. So I know that 2 to the 5th power is 32. What is 2 to the 8th power? Oh, guessed it perfectly. So 256 is the same as 2 to the 8th. Let me put an X there. So I just rewrote 256 to the x power. I rewrote it as 2 to the 8th to the x power. How is that helpful? Well, because 16 I know is 2 to the 4th. So I'm going to rewrite that as 2 to the 4th to the y. And then when I simplify that further, because I know that whenever we have a power raised to another power, we just multiply those powers together. So then this will become 2 to the 8x divided by 2 to the 4y. All right, why is that, or how is that helpful? Well, you should know, and if you don't, this is a reminder. Whenever you are dividing numbers that have the same base, all you do to solve is to subtract the exponents, right? So for example, 3 to the 5th divided by 3 squared is equal to 3 to the 5 minus 2, which is equal to 3 to the 3rd, right? So that's something that I'm assuming you've learned. If not, take this as a reminder or as a lesson for you as well. So if we utilize that same idea for what we have here, then we're going to say, well, that means this 2 to the 8x over 2 to the 4y should be equal to 2 to the 8x minus 4y, right? So 2 to the 8x minus 4y. So then how is that helpful? Well, if I know that 2x minus y equals 3, again, this is part of the learn by doing, because maybe we got this far and you're still not certain how that's helpful. But it's like, well, why do they tell me 2x minus y equals 3? Well, 2x minus y, how does that relate to 8x minus 4y? Is there a relationship? Well, sure there is. If I multiply 2x minus y by 4, I actually get 8x minus 4y, right? And in fact, I get that 8x minus 4y is equal to 12. So that means that this 2 to the 8x minus 4y power is actually 2 to the 12th, given the information provided by the question. So all I need to do now is go to my calculator and figure out, well, what is 2 to the 12th power? And what we will find is that 2 to the 12th power is equal to 4,096. So there's our answer. Somewhat complicated. It's definitely one of the harder questions for students who have never seen this format before. But once you've seen it, again, typically a student doesn't, continuously miss this question style. So hopefully this video or that series of information was helpful for you. All right, let's move on to the next question. Next question. So this is what we call a diagram question. So a diagram question is any question that provides any visual information. In this case, we have this histogram. That's the visual information provided. I always suggest that whenever you have the visual information, that you pay attention to it first and that you make sure you understand what exactly it's saying really before reading anything. Like that's my strategy. I like to make sure I really fully understand the diagram first and then I read after that. So it looks like this is a number generator outcome and the x-axis is number selected and the y-axis is frequency, like all histograms. So if I were to try to describe this, it looks like this first bar here represents the fact that a number between 1 and 1.9 is selected 45 times, right? And a number between 2 and 2.9 is selected 55 times. Okay, I think I understand what's happening here. Now I actually read the question. So that's my suggestion to you. Like, make sure you understand the diagram, then read the question. So the question says, a computer program generates a number between 1 and 9.9, right? So that represents all of the possibilities down here, multiple times, right? That's our frequency. That's the multiple times thing. The histogram shows the outcome of the program. We see that, all right? So I'm going to erase all that. We do see that in the diagram. The question says, based on the histogram, what is a possible value for the median of the data? Okay. Now, this is where things get a little bit tricky. All right. So how do we find medians from a histogram? Well, funny enough, we've already seen a question today on median, which means this is an important topic, right? Median may show up more frequently on the ACT than the term mean does. So it's a worthwhile skill to build. So we saw in the previous median question on this video that I said, just line up all the data points in order and then cross out from the edges until you find the middle number, right? Because median just means middle number. Well, how do you find a median from a frequency table or a histogram? Here's how you do it. So we're still going to look at this in the same way that we looked at the list of data, right? Everything is already in order for us, though. All those numbers are between 1 and 1.9 and 2 and 2.9. So this is already in order up to our largest possibilities. But the frequency is what's going to matter. So if I already had things in order, then my next step is to cross out from the edges. So here's how you do that with a histogram. If I were to cross out all these data points, well, how many data points are those? Those are 45 data points, okay? That means I need to cross out from the right side also 45 data points in order to balance out the 45 data points I crossed out from the left-hand side. So then I know that this is 5, right? So not quite there yet. This is 15, so now I'm up to 20. So I'll just write 20 there to keep track. And then this is 10, so now I'm up to 30. And then this is 15. Okay, perfect. So at this point, crossing out 1, 2, 3, 4 bars on the right-hand side matches with my 45 data points that I just crossed out on the left-hand side. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense. And we have more to do, right? Because we're still not to the middle value yet. Well, then what if I crossed out these 55 here? Okay, so I have 55 on the right-hand side of that. Well, this would be 25. And this would be, oh, this would be 35. So I'm only going to take 30 of these. And now that's balanced. So I still have 5 left in that bar, basically. So hopefully that makes sense. Now I've canceled out all of these two with all of these plus 30 of those 35 inside of that bar, which means that when I count out 5 from here with these 5, the only data points left, and I'll use a different color, the only data points left will be in this region here that is all data points between 3 and 3.9, which means the middle number, my median, must be between 3 and 3.9, which is why choice G is the correct answer there. So hopefully that makes sense on how to find a median from a histogram. All right, next question. So then our next question here, let's see, why isn't that? There we go. Our next question here says the linear function f of x equals 5x plus 2 is graphed on the coordinate plane. My suggestion, again, is as soon as you see that you just go ahead and graph this in your on your graphing calculator. So you'll have 5x plus 2 graphed on your graphing calculator. Then it says the function g of x is equal to f of x plus 1 minus 1. All right, well, there's some simplification to do. So I'm going to call this a simplified question. It does still fit in my generic description of what a simplified question is, because again, those are short questions between 1 and 3 lines long that contain an equation. So we have that scenario here. So how do we simplify this g of x equals f of x plus 1 minus 1? And again, simplified, this is also, I could also think of it as plug in information from the question. We know that f of x is 5x plus 2. So that means g of x is really f of x plus 1, which would be 5 times x plus 1, and then minus 1. And then when I simplify that by distributing the 5, I have 5x plus 5 minus 1, which simplifies to 5x plus 4, right? So g of x is equal to 5x plus 4. The question goes on to say, what is a function of g of x? All right, so then how did I get, oh, I'm sorry, I have a plus 2. I have a plus 2, I forgot about my plus 2 there. So I also have a plus 2 that's here from my f of x, which is why g of x is actually 5x plus 6. So be very careful. I almost got tricked on that one. And you can see that choice B actually said 5x plus 4. So that was very close and very dangerous, right? So we just got to be very careful about being careful. There's obviously a 5x plus 2 there. So f of x plus 1, we put the f of x plus 1 in there. We have the minus 1, but we can't forget that there's also a plus 2 here. All right, so that's why our answer is g of x equals 5x plus 6. So that's how you would do that, through simplification and maybe also a little bit of plug-in information from the question. Okay, next question. So the next question here says one solution to a quadratic equation is 6 plus 3i. What is the quadratic equation? Okay, this might be the most complex math-wise, the most mathematically complex question we've seen all day. There's not really a lot of strategy to be learned here. This is really a knowledge question. So I'll put knowledge. I'll just put no for knowledge. And what's the knowledge that you have to have? Well, first of all, you need to know what a quadratic is, right? So a quadratic equation or a quadratic function has this format: y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Like that is the format of a quadratic function. So we have that taken care of. And then the next thing to know is, well, okay, if we're told that one solution is 6 plus 3i, then it's highly likely that the other solution is 6 minus 3i, right? So I'd have 6 plus 3i and 6 minus 3i as my solutions. How does that help me? Well, that means that x equals 6 plus 3i and x equals 6 minus 3i. Okay. So again, how is that helpful? So that means that x minus 6 minus 3i equals 0, right? If I'm subtracting 6 and subtracting 3i to set that equal to 0. And x minus 6 plus 3i also equals 0, right? Again, subtracting 6 and adding 3i to make that equal 0. Okay. So then if these are my solutions, right? That's how I find my solutions. Then I can utilize that to then backtrack into the equation itself. So then my equation, I should be able to find my equation by multiplying x minus 6 minus 3i times x minus 6 plus 3i. And just for space, I'm going to erase the rest of these things so we can see clearly how to find this answer. So just take some time to erase that. All right. All right, that's good enough. And then, so now how do I solve this? It's kind of like foiling or distributing, right? So x times x is x squared. X times negative 6 is minus 6x. X times positive 3y is plus 3ix. And then negative 6 times x is minus 6x. And negative 6 times negative 6 is plus 36. And negative 6 times 3i is minus 18i. Lastly, we have negative 3i times x, so it's a minus 3ix. And then negative 3i times negative 6, which would become I'll just write on the second line, plus 18i. And then a negative 3i times positive 3i, which is minus 9i squared. Let's combine some like terms. I use a different color. So we have positive 3ix and negative 3ix are now gone. We have a negative 18i and a positive 18i, which are also gone. So we're left with x squared. So that's taken care of now. Negative 6x minus 6x, so that's minus 12x. So that's taken care of now. And then I have plus 36. So that's taken care of now. And minus 9i squared. I squared is equal to negative 1. So negative 9 times negative 1 is positive 9. So this will become a positive 9. Yeah. All right, continue combining like terms. 36 plus 9 is 45. Therefore, our answer here is x squared minus 12x plus 45. And that's the reason why choice J is the right answer. So definitely a difficult question. You can see that the percentages here, people chose G more likely than other, and then H, right? This is like the third option. The correct answer is actually the third option in terms of popularity for choosing the right answer on this question. So this is again in the, I would say, learn by doing category. If you're ever given a complex number like this with a whole number or integer and an imaginary number as a solution to a quadratic, just please remember that you're not more than likely, you are going to utilize 6 plus 3i and 6 minus 3i as your solutions. And you saw how I went through that. So feel free to rewind the video and take a look at that again if you'd like to. All right, next question. 38, the function f of x is the inverse of the function h of x. If h of x equals 3x or 3 times x minus 1 cubed plus 5, what is the function for f of x? So f of x is the inverse. So how do we find an inverse? So to find an inverse, I'm going to first of all set h of x to y. Okay, so I'm going to rewrite this as y equals 3x minus 1 cubed plus 5. Whenever we're finding an inverse, your first step is to switch x and y. So we're going to replace this and make this x equals 3y minus 1 to the third plus 5. And then your next step is to solve for y. So again, this is definitely a knowledge question. No real strategy on that. So now how do we solve for y? Well, first, I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides. So we have x minus 5 equals 3, parentheses, y minus 1 to the third power. Next, in my pursuit of getting y isolated, I'm going to divide by 3. So that's gone. So now we have x minus 5 over 3 equals y minus 1 to the third power. And lastly, next, I'm going to cube root both sides because again, my whole objective here is to get y by itself. So I'm going to cube root both sides. Let's go up here for space. So now I have the cube root of x minus 5 over 3 is equal to y minus 1. And then lastly, I'm going to add 1 to both sides, right, to get y by itself finally. So now I have the cube root of x minus 5 over 3 plus 1 equals y. So there is my inverse, and we can see that that matches exactly with what choice F says. So if you missed this question, if it's because you didn't know that that's the process for how to find an inverse, please write that down in your notes. All knowledge questions, all learn by doing questions, I do suggest that you make note of them. So again, the first process is to switch x and y, right? So we went from y value out there to x value out there. And then the second part of that process is to then isolate the new y, right? The new position for where y is. So that's how you find inverses. So that's gone. Let's find the next question. All right, here's our next question. A circle is graphed on the coordinate plane with a center at the origin. So we see that. Point A is graphed on the line. So we see that. I am, if I were you, going to suggest that on your notes, you write down what point A is. So point A is, looks like it's 3, 4. So A is at 3, 4. All right, so we know that we go through the point 3, 4, and we know that the center of the circle is 0, 0. So that's all that they've told us so far. Then the question goes on to say, what is the equation of the line tangent to the circle at point A? All right, so more knowledge, okay? So this is good. More knowledge going on here. What you should know is that a tangent line is always going to be perpendicular. So I'll just draw the perpendicular symbol. Perpendicular to the radius. To the radius at the point of tangency. Okay, so that means if we want a tangent line, and I'll draw it here, but if you're doing the digital version of the ACT, you won't be able to draw on your screen. So you can't do that, but you do need to know that this is what's going to happen. All right, so then you could do the math this way. I guess you could, as a shortcut, you could use a calculator and graph each of these answer choices and see which one goes through the point 3, 4 and looks like it would be perpendicular. There's probably more than one option here. I can see that, choice A is the only one that has a 4/3 slope. So maybe that would be crossed out by just graphing on the calculator. Choice C and D both have -3/4. So it may be hard from just a slope perspective to know that. But if this is the center, and then this is a radius, we can actually figure out the slope. So the slope there is up. Use a different color. The slope from there is up 4, to the right 3. So the slope of our radius is 4/3, which means the slope of our tangent line, which I just told you must be perpendicular to the radius. Perpendicular slopes have negative reciprocal slopes. So perpendicular slopes are negative reciprocal. So the slope of this tangent line would be -3/4. So we know that, which means choice A and B are gone. The question just becomes, should I have a 7/4 as a y-intercept, or should I have a 5/4 as a y-intercept? And 7/4 as a decimal is like 1.3 something, I believe. You can go to my calculator. 1.75, which means your y-intercept will be down here, which doesn't make any sense, right? You're not going to have a tangent line out here that also crosses the y-axis right there. Whereas 25 divided by 4 is 6.25, which is over here. right? So that's more likely to have a tangent line there that's going through that y-intercept. And that's the reason why choice D is the correct answer. So that's why I love diagram questions generally, because even if you focused only on the y-intercept even that would be useful. Choice A has a y-intercept at 0. No way a tangent line is going through the y-axis at 0. Choice B has it at 6.25. Yep, that makes sense. Choice C has it at 1.75. That makes no sense. Choice D also has it at 6.25. So even just based upon y-intercept alone, you would know that it's either going to be choice B or D. And then you look at it based upon slope, right? So the slope for choice B is 3/4, and the slope for choice D is negative 3/4. If you were to just think about, well, where does my tangent line, or what direction does my tangent line have? That is what it should look like, and therefore its slope should be negative. So I like that way even better than what I just did, right? So this is purely looking at the diagram, which, like I've said before, means take a look at the diagram, actually understand what the diagram is showing you. So if we had drawn this line, or just like kind of thought about, well, where is this line in comparison to the circle, you would see that choice D is the obvious only correct answer because of where the y-intercept is and because of the slope being negative. We need both of those things, and choice D is the only one that gives us that. So that's good for that one. Next question, event X and event Y are independent events. If P of X, which when we see a capital P like that, that represents probability. So if you didn't know that, that's kind of important. So again, just more for you to know. So what we need to know is that whenever there is an independent or two independent events, and we have one event or the other, you're going to have this equation. This is going to be equal to Px plus Py minus Px times Py. So please add that into your notes. I don't think these questions show up frequently, but it's just good to have, especially as we aim towards getting a very high score on the ACT. So again, you can tell that, if you didn't know this, it's gonna be very hard for you to get the right answer outside of guessing. But if you do know it, it's actually fairly simple, right? So we know that Px or P of X is 0.2. We know that P of Y is 0.4. So we're just subtracting that from P of X, which is 0.2, times 0.4. Okay, so order of operations says that we should do the multiplication first. So 0.2 times 0.4, well, that's equal to 0.08. So then 0.2 plus 0.4, that's equal to 0.6. So we have 0.6 minus 0.08. 0.6 minus 0.08 is equal to 0.52. And that is the reason why choice B is the correct answer. So again, this is a knowledge question, so make sure you write a note as to what knowledge goes along with this specific type of question. And again, the fact that these are independent events is what makes it important. All right, let's get rid of that. Next question. A survey was conducted to determine the number of people who owned cats and dogs. The results are shown in the Venn diagram. All right, so again, this is a diagram question. Like I've mentioned before on this video, whenever I have a diagram, I like to stop and make sure I understand that diagram before continuing to read. So I'm going to do that. So it looks like there are 123 people who own a cat. There are 156 people who own a dog. There are X number of people who own both. And there are 37 people who own neither, right? So there's 37 people who don't own a cat or a dog. X people own both cat and dog. And then 156 only dog and 123 only cat. All right, I think I understand what this Venn diagram is telling me. The question goes on to say, if there were 358 total people surveyed. All right, so I think I can make an equation because I know that there are 100, I'll write it up here. There are 156 for dogs only, plus 123 for cats only. And how would there's 37 for neither. What would I do with the X? Well, I think is that equal to 358? Let me go to my calculator. So 156 plus 123 plus 37 is 316. This is equal to 316. That means that if I know that if that represents 316 people, right? 316 people told us, some of them told us, I only own a dog. 123 of them told us, I only own a cat. 37 of them told us, I own neither of those animals. And then X of them told us that they own both. Then 316 plus X has to equal 58. So I actually know that X is equal to 42. Okay, I don't know if that's valuable, but I think hopefully the logic of what I just said makes sense. So what's the question? If there were 358 total people surveyed, how many total people own a dog? Okay, well, we know 156 people own a dog, but there are also 42 people who own a dog, right? Because 42 of those people represent the X number who own a dog and a cat. So we have the dog owners that are only dog owners, but we also have the dog owners who happen to also be cat owners. So our actual answer here should be the 156 for just dogs plus the 42 owners who have dogs and cats. And that's going to give us 198. And that's why our answer here should be choice H, right? So again, paying attention to the diagram, making sure you fully understand every bit of what's being said becomes hugely valuable to you on this. Okay, so this question says 6 different colored dinner plates are being placed on a circular table, equally spaced from each other. I'm going to treat this like a plug-in picture question. So I'm going to draw my circle. And I'm going to have a plate here and a plate there and a plate there as 3 and 4 and 5 and 6. And we're going to pretend like those are perfectly evenly spaced, but those are my plates, right? I like to plug in picture anytime, and I suggest every student plug in picture anytime a question describes something that can be drawn. We also know that these are all different colors, so I'm going to make up some colors. I'm going to say this plate is red, and this one is blue, and this one is green, and this one is yellow, and this one is orange, and this one is, let's say purple, P. All right. Then it says, in how many different ways can the dinner plates be arranged on the table? So usually with a question like this is a tricky question. All right, so I see why the student made the mistake here. Usually when I see a question on the ACT that asks how many different ways they can be arranged, I actually do it this way. I'll draw little space bars here to represent all the possible positions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then I'll say, well, how many different options were there per position? Well, there's 6 options in the first position. There's 5 options on the second position, 4 options, 3 options, 2 options, and 1 option. And then we multiply them all together. And that's going to typically be our answer. The challenge with this is the question does say that it's a circular table. The way I've written this out is linear, right? Where it's obvious that order matters, right? Like the thing that comes first is different from the thing that comes second. How does the circular part of this change things? Well, the circular part of this is we don't know where to start, right? Like, do I have to start here? No, I don't. I could start there. I really can start wherever I want. So the difference here is when I'm looking at these 6 positions on the table, the first position only has 1 option, meaning I just choose a color and I place it there. Then everything after that is where the position matters, right? So then if I say, okay, I'm going to the right of wherever that first choice was, that second position has 5 options. That third position has 4 options. That fourth position has 3 options. That fifth position has 2 options. And then the sixth position only has 1 option. This is a very tricky thing. I hope that you can see the difference between what I said here with the 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and what I'm saying here with the 1, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Another way to think of it is learning by doing, which would be to say, you're only going to have a scenario like this where that first position is 1 and then you do a countdown when you're in a circle. right? That's the only shape where you will be able to say, on this test at least, I don't actually know where I'm starting. I could actually start anywhere, and therefore the first position isn't necessarily distinct in some way. It's just a choice. So therefore, I can't say there's 6 options for the first position. It's just one option. I just choose where I start. And then from there, I have this whole countdown thing. So that's the difference. If you did it this way, which is obviously the wrong way, you would in fact get 720. 6 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is 720. But given that we incorporate the meaning of the circle, right, of the circular table, that's how we get to 120, because 5 times, or 1 times 5 times 4 times 3 times 2 times 1 is actually equal to 120. So that's our reasoning for that answer there. And I apologize for it being so tricky. But again, it's kind of a great thing. You're less likely to ever miss a question like that again when you see the setup as being at a circular table, right? So that's how I would think of it. Our next question here, the polynomial function f of x with a degree of 4 is graphed on the coordinate plane as shown. So a degree of 4 just means that the highest degree or the highest exponent in the polynomial is a 4th power. So that's good to know. There's some knowledge here. Again, what you should know is that typically the highest degree in a polynomial also lets you know how many solutions there are. And the way that you know where a solution is for a polynomial is x-intercepts. But we can see that on this graph, we only have 2 x-intercepts. So how do we reconcile the fact that we know the degree function is 4, but we only have 2 intercepts? The way we reconcile that through knowledge is that means there are 2, in this case, there are 2 real solutions, which are represented by the x-intercepts. So what happened to the other 2 that we were expecting? There are also 2 imaginary solutions, which, of course, if they're imaginary, we would not expect to see an x-intercept. So again, that's knowledge base. I would definitely write that down. The degree of a polynomial is equivalent to the number of x-intercepts. If the number of x-intercepts is ever different from the degree of the polynomial, the difference represents the number of imaginary solutions, whereas the x-intercepts, or the number of x-intercepts that you see, and the position, the location of those x-intercepts, will tell you the real solutions. So make sure you write that down in case you've not learned that in school. So the polynomial function f of x with a degree of 4 is graphed on the coordinate plane as shown. The question goes on to say, based on the graph, which of the following must be true? I always pay attention to must be, because I think if the wording of the question says must be, there may be answers that could be true. So I want to be very careful not to choose the could be's and make sure I choose the must be answer. So based on the graph, which of the following must be true about the nature of the zeros of the function f of x? Yeah, complete knowledge question. So choice F, there are 4 imaginary solutions. Nope, because we have 2 x-intercepts, so there's not 4 imaginary. Choice G, the one that you chose, there are 4 unique real solutions. Yeah, I don't know, actually. And this is where it could be true that there are 4 unique, like 2 unique real solutions, which we see, and then maybe 2 unique imaginary solutions, which we don't see, which would match with the 4th degree. But for all I know, the 2 imaginary solutions are a duplicate, right? They're the same number. I don't really know that because I can't tell what those are. So G is a could be, not a must be. Choice H, there are 2 real solutions and 2 imaginary solutions. Absolutely yes, right? And hopefully you can see why H is better than G. Like G is possible, but H must be the truth, right? There are definitely 2 real solutions because we see the x-intercepts, and there are definitely 2 imaginary solutions because we don't see the other 2 x-intercepts. So that's why G is the best answer. Choice J, just to check it out, there are 3 unique solutions and 1 solution has a multiplicity of 2. Yeah, that doesn't make any sense, right? So I don't really know that for sure. I don't know, like maybe that's possible, but I don't know. So H is the only one that's definitely right. So the reasoning there hopefully makes sense. And I think this is our last question. Once again, we have a long question So this is right back to our translate word problem strategy. So we're going to follow it in the same way we have in the previous translate word problem questions, reading a sentence at a time, writing down the meaning. I just scanned down and I see this word probability. So this is also part of our trend. We saw a trend of using calculator for questions, so pay attention to that. And I think this is like the third or fourth probability question that we've seen. So really pay attention to writing that down in your notes. I love trends when we're going over tests because what it shows you is if you just focused on probability questions and when to use a calculator, you'll be able to, focus on only two types of questions and possibly get like 6 or 7 more questions correct, right? So I think that's a good bang for your buck in terms of strategy. So let's look at this question and see how it's any different, if at all, from previous probability questions. So the first sentence says, Sophie has entered a contest to win a cash prize. All right, nothing to write down. Just keep it in mind. Sophie is part of this contest. The next sentence, she will reach into a jar of marbles, select 3 marbles, and not put them back in the jar. Okay, that's very important because if she's not putting them back in the jar and we know we're leading to probability, then every time she reaches back in the jar, there is 1 less marble, right? So that denominator number is going to continue to go down. So she selects 3 marbles and she does not put them back in the jar. The jar has 20 red marbles. Okay, here we have, I always write stuff down whenever I see numbers. So I'm gonna say we have 20 red, so 20 capital R for red. 20 blue, so 20 capital B for blue. 5 yellow, so 5 capital Y for yellow. 5 green, so 5 capital G for green. In order to win the prize, she must select 3 green marbles in a row. All right. She selected a green marble on her first try. Okay, so this is getting a little bit trickier. We know she wants to select 3 marbles. We know she wants to select 3 green marbles, but now this question is saying she's already selected the first one. Right? She selected a green marble on her first try. Well, what was the probability? And I'll just keep reading the question. What is the probability that she will win the cash prize after her next 2 draws? So I'm a little confused because I don't know. Do I need to find probability for all 3 things? Do I just find the probability for just 2 of the things? I'm not 100% certain. I'm going to go with all 3, see what happens, and then if I need to adjust, go from there. So the probability of choosing the first green marble would be, what does she want? She wants a green marble. There's 5 of them. What is she choosing out of? Looks like there's 40 total marbles, right? 20 red, 20 blue, 5 yellow, 5 green. Actually, yeah, that's 50. So 20 plus 20 is 40 plus 5 plus 5 is 10, so 50. So that's 5 out of 50 for her first probability to get the green. But of course, then she doesn't put it back. So then to get the next green marble, there's only 4 left, and there are only 49 marbles left. So that's to get the next one. And then she wants to choose another green marble. Now there's only 3 left. And now there are only 48 total marbles in the bag to choose from. So I believe this is what's going on. She wants to do this and that in order to get 3 green marbles. And again means we're multiplying the probabilities by each other. So let's just do the math. So my numerator, 5 times 4 is 20 times 3 is 60. Go to my calculator. What is 50 times 49 times 48? I get 117,600. Of course, I want to reduce that. The answer choices makes it obvious that I want to reduce it, but I just want to reduce it. So I'm going to start off by just saying, cross those zeros out. So I have 6 over 11,760. And let's see, all of my numerators have 1s, which means the only way for me to get there is to divide by 6. So if I divide by 6 on top and divide by 6 on bottom, I'd have a 1 in my numerator. And let's see in my calculator again. Open up my calculator. And let's see. So let's divide that. That's gone. So 11,760 divided by 6 is 19. Did I do the math wrong? 11,760, 117,000. Did I do the math wrong? 50. Let's do the math again. 50 times 49 times 48 is 117,600. And then divided by 10 top and bottom, which gives me 6 over 11,760. But then when I divide that by 6, I'm actually getting 1960, 1 over 1960, which looks like the 196. So I'm a little confused as to why am I not getting 1 over 196? What is probability that she would go in there? So then maybe, let's see, if I didn't care about this one, and maybe I really do only care about these second two, right? Remember, I did mention that there was some confusion in the beginning. So maybe that's what I should have done, right? So if I only cared about the second two, which, I mean, technically it does say, so maybe now I feel a bit more confident about that being the right way. I'd have 4 times 3 is 12, that's the numerator. And then 49 times 48 is 2,352. And again, all of my answer choices have 1 as the numerator, so I'm going to divide by 12, top and bottom. And I get, of course, I get 1 in the numerator. It's 12 divided by 12 is 1. But then 2352 divided by 12 is 196. There it is. All right, so there's my answer. That's why choice C is correct. And just notice how, I made a mistake there. We're all human. We're going to make mistakes. You're going to make mistakes. Just don't be the type of person who just chooses the answer because it looks close enough, right? I could have said, oh, well, 1 over 1,960, that looks close enough. I'm just going to go with C. Yeah, it would have worked out in this case, but a lot of the times it doesn't work out, right? So especially given that I already had some concern in the beginning about, do I care about all 3 draws of marbles from the bag, or do I only care about 2? This was using the 5 over 50. This was the trying out that first option where I did care about all 3, right? So 5 out of 50, 4 out of 49, 3 out of 48. I get an answer. It's not listed there. But I tell all my students is when you do math and you don't see your answer, that's the best thing that could happen to you. We got to really change our mindset about that. It does not mean you're stupid. Like, just go back and find your mistake, right? The worst thing you can do is do the math, think you're right, not see your answer choice there, and then just say, I'll just choose the closest one. Instead of saying, you know what, that is a blessing in disguise. This is how the question, or the question is telling me that I made a mistake. Let me go back and find my mistake and then find the answer like we did here. We found our mistake and then we found the answer. So this is why that's the right answer. All right, so I think that's it. Yep, that is it for us. So that's all, and I hope you enjoyed this video, and hopefully it was helpful for you in terms of preparing for the ACT exam. So many questions here, so many different question types. Pay attention to the trends. Pay attention to how we break down every single question versus, whether it's a diagram question, a translate word problem question, a simplify question, a calculator question, a matrix question. I think we said diagram already. So, there's all these different question types, and these question types just show up over and over and over again. All right, take care.